Three things. One, I got a haircut, and I realized when I was getting the haircut that I've never gotten a haircut without also cutting my beard at the same time. So, novelty is not always good, but in this case, I'm doing it. Two, I guess I'll make this one a study. A super interesting study that I don't think has been done. I was reading Behave by Robert Sapolsky, which is super interesting about human behavior, and realized that there are no good studies done on the health effects of religion because it's almost impossible. But a study that should be done that hasn't been done, which is beautifully designed, I believe, is let's say you take 300 people, 300 atheists that don't go to church, don't go to Toastmasters, because that'll be one of our controls. You divide them in three groups of 100. How convenient that there's 300. And one won't do anything, but you'll just study them, get the effects. This would be called something like the health and socioeconomic effects of religion on atheists, something like that. So you would take health parameters and socioeconomic parameters, things like that, something to fill it out, but definitely health and socioeconomic parameters. And then this would be a long-term study. So you take 100 people that just keep doing whatever they're doing, but now you're tracking them. 100 people join a church and start going regularly, and you start tracking them. And then the third group joins Toastmasters. Now, those are your control because church isn't just about religious belief and that type of thing, but it's also about the social relationships and the group and the routine. There's a lot of stuff that goes with it, not just the spiritual beliefs. And it's one of the reasons it's hard to study, because you can't take a group of people and say, all right, you believe in God and you don't believe in God, and then at a certain point say, okay, switch. You don't believe in God, you believe in God, and we'll see what changes. It's impossible to do, basically, other than some sort of super intense brainwashing, which would not be a study you could publish anyway. So and it wouldn't be nice. So you do this, and it's according to their actions. You're not actually controlling beliefs, but you do it for a set period of time, whatever, maybe 3 months. Not a super long study, but an interesting study. But you inform them at the beginning that you're going to be following up after the official study, so you get people to commit to that. And there have been some really long-range studies done, like in a Harvard graduating class for 60 years, stuff like that. And this would be some sort of ongoing thing, something like this. It's a really ambitious study, and it's the type of study that can make a career in psychology or sociology or physiology, brain chemistry, whoever would be doing this study, or a group of people that would be doing this study. And it would be fairly small group interactions, because the next thing that happens is you conclude the study after 3 months, 6 months, however long it is. But just like you inform them, you keep studying them, you keep tracking them to track the resonating effects, whatever. And now what you're going to have occur is other groups are going to form, which would be really interesting. So if you have 100 people that have been going to church for 3 months or 6 months, then most of them, we assume, because they were atheists to begin with, but they agreed to do this, so that'll throw off your numbers a little bit according to the overall class. But most of them will probably stop, maybe 90%, but maybe 10% don't. Right? They found some sort of benefit, they were converted, something happened in there. And now, because people lie to each other and themselves, it's really hard to ask them if they're converted, because they're a social organization, which you're changing, but it might be resistant to the idea. But you can tell through their actions if there was some sort of significant change, probably in beliefs, definitely in actions, right? That's a tautology. So maybe 10 stay in. And maybe this happens in Toastmasters too. Maybe most quit, but some stay in, maybe 10%, right? We'll just guess. I don't know what the numbers would really be. No one knows until you do the study. So now out of those two groups, the church-going group and the Toastmasters going group, you've created two groups after the official study was concluded. And now you're doing this follow-up. And now you have a lot of comparisons that you can do, because you can compare the two groups that have formed within themselves, but you can also compare, just like you would, the groups that quit both over time and the groups that didn't, the groups that stayed, and you can cross compare the group that didn't stay in the church going aspect, they didn't continue that, versus the group that did stay with Toastmasters, right? So you can cross compare the group that quit Toastmasters after the official part of the study was done versus the group that stayed in religion. So you can compare them against themselves, the group that stayed versus the group that left in religion and Toastmasters across the board, the group that stayed versus the group that didn't stay. So there's two more comparisons, and then you can cross compare them. So you have 6 comparison groups right there. And now you add in your original control group, and really you have 2 control groups for this, but you add in your original control group and you start cross-referencing the comparisons there, and you have at least 10 more connections that you can do, because you can do the people that don't do anything in probably a very tiny group. I have no idea what this would end up being. Might end up being something like 1%, like one person out of the 100 that join either a church or a Toastmasters group. You know, it'd be ideal if like 2 joined each, and then you have 3 total groups. But you have at least, if even if just one person did that, now you have 16 different comparisons that you can do. So it'd be super interesting to track that over a large period of time and see the different patterns that emerge as far as health and socioeconomic changes that go through over life and how they get classified. And then trying to connect the causal relationships is obviously a huge part of the study. Do you belong into that? Does that cause whatever effects we're seeing, or is the prevalence for this effect part of the cause of them staying in the organization? And we can puzzle about all of that for a long time. Super interesting though. I would love to see that study done. It would just be so interesting, and I wish someone would do it. And I think the small group dynamic is modeled really well by Len Oakes in his dissertation turned book Prophetic Charisma, that was about studying charismatic leaders, cult leaders in Australia. So cults are generally small groups. If they weren't cults, they would, if they were successful, if they were large groups, they'd be called religions or companies, depending, tech startups. Very cultish. Interesting. So something I would like to say. I'm guessing I'm not going to get around to it. Definitely don't have the credentials for it. I'm probably not going to organize it. So I wish someone would do it. Anyways, the third thing. What was the third thing I was going to talk about? Let's see here. Religious study. And oh man, I should have wrote down notes. I got so much into the study. I forgot what the third thing was. I thought there was a major third thing too. Yeah. Thinking about going on a hot air balloon ride with my mother. She would like to, and I would like to, and I'm limited in other things that I can do. So that would be cool. That would work out well. And we went on the riverboat again down in Grand Rapids, the Grand Lady, which is awesome. I really like the riverboat. I even like it better than the Badger, which goes across Lake Michigan. So that's kind of interesting. And what else have I been looking at? Huh. Oh, so the beliefs that I need to change. So I felt very limited in what I can do, and I need to change that somehow. Now, cognitively, I know that obviously very much improved over the last couple of months too, and I'm learning about what I can do, what I can't do. Driving 2 hours total, 1 hour each way to go to the riverboat, just the driving of 2 hours or riding in a car, all those little bumps, affects my neck quite a bit for, well, basically until my next neck adjustment. I can't quite get it right. So that's really annoying. But I'm more limited than some people, but a lot less limited than others. And I cognitively know that. I know of a guy named John Morrow, who was a quadriplegic and wrote a blog through a voice system after moving down to Mexico and his mother taking care of him so they could cut medical expenses, and became a multimillionaire based off that blog. So that's an incredible story and super interesting. And what I need to change my beliefs to, not on a cognitive level, but on an affective level and a conative level, right? Conative is action. It's not a word we normally use. Affective is emotional. I need to get this view of the benevolent universe, meaning in a universe that can be understood and that can be effected. So that can be changed to some extent. We're obviously not talking about the huge universe, but just my universe, some sort of locus of control. And heroic man, which could be heroic woman too, which means a person that can understand and effect their universe, their context, their environment. And cognitively, I know those things, and I used to have the feeling of being able to do that, but I don't, just to some extent or a large extent now. I don't have that feeling or that internal belief anymore. I've really just recently noticed that that's gone. I've obviously had all sorts of ups and downs over these last 2 years, or life in general, but definitely these last 2 years. And I need to drive that into my mind somehow, that feeling. And really, if you think about it, all of our thoughts, even our beliefs, are skill development, right? They're firing in the neurons of your brain, which then get reinforced or not reinforced. If they don't get reinforced, a thing called myelin, which coats them and makes the signal stronger, starts to decay away, and that's how your beliefs and habits decay, change. Extreme stress or disease can also break it down really fast. And that's what MS does to a large extent, is it breaks down the myelin around the nerves. So you can get someone like, I believe there was a world-class cellist player that was 28 years old in Europe, and she forgot how to play the cello. And 8 months later, they figured out that she had MS, and so her myelin's breaking down in her brain, and you can go from world-class cello player to not knowing how to play the cello in a very short period of time. Most people, that would take a very long time, or even an entire lifetime. But you're always developing some, so you can rewire the brain essentially, and you can rewire it for specific skills, but you can also rewire those thoughts because they're firings of neurons as well. So I have to find a way to reinforce this idea of the benevolent universe and heroic man and get those firing repeatedly on a regular basis, essentially practicing the skill of having those beliefs, which is super interesting concept. I really like that idea. I've obviously been reading The Talent Code by Daniel Coyle recently and going over all this information about myelin and nerves firing again. And I've been thinking about how to do that, and I kind of went in the direction of some like religious mantras and some self-talk and stuff like that, and didn't exactly seem to work. I'm combining a lot of kind of weird stuff, training. I trained for a year with an Ashaya monk and try to pull in some of that. I'm going on a meditation retreat here soon, which would be an interesting experiment. I talked about that before. And I've talked to Shad Helmstetter, the guy that started the whole self-talk movement. We've had a couple of long phone conversations. Very interesting guy, interesting ideas. He's at an interesting point in his career as well, which are what our talks were about. But I think that the basic idea of how you would describe this benevolent universe is that it can be done. Right? That's the basic belief. That's kind of the feeling. It can be done. Can be done. And I'm wondering if that in itself is a way to drive it into the mind. And then the heroic man or heroic woman, the basic belief and feeling there is that I can do it. It's very self-centered within this benevolent universe. You have to have the benevolent universe to have the heroic man. Otherwise, you're just kind of floating, bouncing through space. This I can do it. And it's interesting because I have no reason to believe in a break in causality that would allow for free will outside of a causal chain. But we have the experience of what we consider free will and basically a break in the causal chain, which is why someone like Ayn Rand treats it as an axiom that it can't be denied, can't be refuted because of the direct perception of it. So you have to start with that as a given and work from there to discover the nature of the universe and everything that's around you. So it's very interesting, but I'm going to do some experiments to try to practice those beliefs, essentially, practice having those beliefs and see what I can come up with. And I wish someone would do that study. And we'll see if I get any weird reactions with this hair. And I've never used this one before. I noticed when I walk into supermarkets before, I used to shop for a guy to get his groceries. And when I was clean cut, I would get my hair cut short and I'd just cut off my beard. I would never get stopped at this Walmart that I would go to get his groceries for him coming out the door. Never. No matter what I had in the car, I could have loaded up the car and walked out the door. No one would have cared. But then I would just let my hair grow out, let my hair and my beard grow out and not trim them, either one at all. And as they got longer, I got stopped more and more often at the door, which is hilarious. I mean, at one point there's a stand near the door. The person that's looking into the store for people leaving the store, like suspicious people, he's watching me check out. He must think I'm faking it or something. And I go up and they're like, "Can I see your receipt?" And it did not happen when I was clean cut. And it happened a lot when I had shaggy hair and a shaggy beard. And I think this look is probably even more provocative, which is funny. I don't know exactly why. It must be skinheads because they cut off the hair on their head sometimes and let the beard grow out. So there you go, skinheads ruining looks for everyone. But it would be interesting to see if that happens again. I thought it was a weird phenomenon. I didn't expect it to happen before when I was just randomly growing out and cutting my hair because I didn't want to go through the effort every morning of keeping it trimmed up. And it was weird to recognize. It took me a few times to recognize it. It might have been like a year of going through that a couple of times before I recognized that pattern. So kind of interesting, and it'd be interesting to do a study on that. But the study of the health and socioeconomic effects of religion on atheists would be a super interesting study, much better. And not super important to me, but I would really enjoy it. What is important to me is the benevolent universe and heroic man beliefs that I need to practice and ingrain in my neurons and build up those strong connections. We will see if I can do that.